1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi warriors, welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host Ingrid. Since this is the last episode dropping for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, I wanted to close out by sharing a different perspective we don't often hear. What it's like for family members, especially parents, walking alongside a loved one who is being abused. The worry, the fear, the hope, and how a family's response can carry so much weight in a victim's journey. Today's guest is Dean, who shares his experience standing next to his daughter as she endured abuse at the hands of her partner. Our conversation then takes a turn into mental health and what Dean is now doing to help others navigate their lives and find fulfillment. Let's get started. Hi, Dean. Thank you for joining me today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the show today. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very excited to have you on as well. Could you go ahead and give a brief background just so we can get to know you a little bit?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I am, my wife and I have been married for, now 32 years. It's pretty exciting. And we have 5 children and 3 grandchildren. I have worked in healthcare for a long time, have a background in nursing. I was a nurse in the newborn ICU for about 7 years, and then I got into healthcare IT, and then did a little bit of real estate in my background as well. And along that path and journey of some discovery and learning about myself, I discovered my passion for mentoring and helping other career fathers like myself who felt a little bit unfulfilled or stuck in life and wondering, what am I going to do? And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
I don't know that we talked about this. I'm a nurse practitioner. I don't know that did we? I don't think we did.
I don't think we did. No.
Okay. So both nursing backgrounds, it makes sense that you would want to do something to help others. You can't get that
It's ingrained in us, isn't it?
It is. It really is. Okay, so, and we're going to get into the mentoring and coaching in a little bit, but you have an interesting take or an interesting perspective, I suppose, on domestic violence, a different view than I've typically been sharing on the podcast. Do you want to go ahead and get into that?
That would be great. Absolutely. So we have my perspective. I have a daughter. We have 2 daughters, and one of our daughters was experienced domestic violence in her life, and this is about 6 years ago. So she was. It's so crazy how some of these things. It seems like it's they start. At least her experience was she was had a previous boyfriend, and they'd broken up, and so she was feeling a little bit of the sorrow from that, and she had gone to with a group of friends. They went to I can't remember why they decided to do this, but they went to a jiu-jitsu class, and so they went there, and one of her friends, they loved it. They thought, oh, this is really cool, and they wanted to go back, and so they started going back to the class and made a connection with the instructor, who ended up being the person who was became the abuser of her. And it was just kind of crazy how that whole story sort of unraveled a little bit. Her and her friend were going, and almost immediately he began sort of pitting her against her friend in terms of how he would advance her friend and advance her through the different levels of progression in jiu-jitsu, and kept telling her she wasn't quite doing it well enough, or even though our daughter was in whatever exercises or matches they were having, she was usually winning, but he kept telling her that she wasn't doing it well enough, or there's some more she needed to do, a different technique, or whatever it was. And but this was after they had this connection. She initially felt this real bond and connection with him. He seemed to know uh, how just the right things to say, the things that she needed to hear, because he knew she was coming out of this relationship where she felt heartbroken. And I think he might, now looking back, preyed on it because, and when I first met him, he seemed to be like the perfect solution to all of her problems in terms of her heartbreak. And he was so kind and doing these things. And then wasn't too long after that we began to notice that she started to want to not do as many things with the family. She seemed to be being pulled further and further away from us. And we didn't understand it. We're like, well, what's going on here? Why is she prioritizing spending time here with him over doing things with us? And that wasn't her nature. It was just not. She always was so connected with family and wanted to do things with us. And I mean, it was a little bit harder because she was an adult. I mean, she was in her she would have been 20 at the time, and so I didn't really feel like I kind of understood that, having raised teenagers, that they and older kids, and they do things on their own, but it just seems really out of the ordinary. The distance that seemed to be happening with us, and my wife had all of us on this. There's this app called Life 360. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a way to kind of track and keep track of people. I don't know if you keep track of them, but you just kind of know their location. And there was a night that a morning I woke up. It was a Sunday morning, and I noticed that her car wasn't out in front of her house. It was early morning, and I thought, where's her car? And I looked up on Live 360 and I could see that she was still over at the gym. And I thought, why is she at the gym at this time of day? And so I went over there and I knocked on the gym door, and I thought, where are you at? and she came out and she said, oh, well, we were here. We were just kind of talking all through the night. But that was really odd. Like, she had never done anything like that. So it kind of just made me think a little bit about, I just felt a little nervous about it. It just seemed odd to me, the behavior. And so I began to watch Life 360 a little more closely and just saying, like, where is she spending her time? And then I started noticing, because she had a room downstairs, that our basement door was unlocked. I went down, I checked her, and so I eventually learned that she had been sneaking out at night, or leaving at night. I shouldn't say sneaking, she's an adult, but that she was leaving the house, and she didn't want us knowing about it. And but I didn't, and this went on for a while. I didn't really know all of what was happening, but the thing that was so apparent to me is, besides the distance and the less time she spent with family, was just how unhappy she seemed to be. Like, there was a different change in her countenance. I could just see it in her face, and I would try to talk to her about it, and she would just try to assure me that everything was fine and it was all okay. And but my wife and I we just began to be more and more nervous and sad a bit about the less time that she was spending with us at home, which was, again, out of the ordinary for her. And then there was where we kind of began to really piece together more of what was happening, that she wasn't confiding in us at all, what she was experiencing. It was on Valentine's Day that would have been in what I think was, but it would have been 2020. She wanted to borrow our truck and go on. She said she was going to go on a trip with this guy. They had we live in Utah. They were going to go up to Bear Lake to this cabin, and I can't really explain it other than there was a gut feeling in me that just felt like there was something off. And so I started to ask her, well, what are they were going to do and where they were going to be? And I just was inquiring. And sometime during that conversation, she just happened to mention to me, I was trying to encourage her not to go. I just said, it's snowy. It's the middle of February. We live in Utah in the mountains, and it just doesn't seem like a great time. It was snowy, and there was snowstorms, and I just tried to. And the more I tried to mention to her about, well, maybe could you just go a different day? There was some storms, but she seemed to be really panicked about. She's like, I just can't tell him that we're not going. I can't tell him that we're not going. Like, why can you not tell him? Like, why? And she said, well, he'll just be upset. Like, well, why? This doesn't make sense. Like, why? I could just see the panic in her face. And the more I tried to encourage her not to go, the more I could just see the fear in her that and that's when I started thinking, well, something must be going on here more than I really know. And I said, well, can you just at least let us know that you got there safely? And because it was a bit of a trip to get to where they were going, and my wife had texted her while they were driving up and noticed again we kind of had watched on the Life 360 app, and they were not exactly where the route should have taken them. And my wife said, and she was nervous about the whole thing and about how upset he was going to be with her not going. My wife said, I don't know why she asked her this, but she said, hey, would you just send us a picture of where you're at? And the picture that we got back, it's so crazy. It was not even a pic. We knew the clothes she left in. And the picture that we received, she wasn't wearing the same clothes as what she had left in. And so we said, when was this picture taken? And it was a picture that she had taken weeks before in a different. So it wasn't even. So now we're really nervous. We're like, okay, where is she at? This picture. It's not. This doesn't make any sense at all. So we began to feel really scared about where she was at, what might be happening, and then it was about midnight, a little after midnight, we got a call from her older sister, and she said, I got a text from Madeline, and she asked me if I could come pick her up. Or I thought, she goes, do you know where she's at? And we said, well, yeah, she told us she was going to the cabin up at Bear Lake, but she said, well, she just asked me if I could come pick her up. And she said, I can't leave. I don't want to drive in the night in the storm. And so I began texting our daughter and asking her, hey, what's going on? Why are you needing me to come pick you? Or why are you asking someone to come pick you up? And there was we didn't get a message back. And I'm like, I just had this sinking feeling, and it's like this, you want to call it parental instinct, whatever it was. It's like something is not right, and I need to go get her. And so I began the trip up, and I'm driving, and I was probably about, I don't know, 45 minutes away from where they were at. She called me and she said, hey, you don't need to keep coming. We know it's stormy up here. I don't want you to keep risking driving up here in the storm. We know it's pretty snowy, so we're packing up and we're going to come home. And I said, no, I'm close enough. I'm gonna keep coming. She's like, no, Dad, really, you don't need to come. I don't want to miss you, and I don't want you to risk. And I said, no, it's okay. I'm totally good. I'm already into the drive. I'm coming. I'll come get you. Well, I arrived at their cabin, and I found out fortunately, I found out where the cabin was because I had her address. I could see where she was at from the Life 360 app. And I saw her truck parked outside the one side of the cabin, and I knocked on the door, and there was no answer. So I thought, okay, well, I'll knock again. And I tried it. It was a side door, and I knocked because that's where the truck was parked. And so then I went around to the front, and I knocked again and waited, and knocked again and waited. And then eventually she opened the door. And of course, I was very relieved to see her. But she looked like a complete mess. She was in tears. She just, the image of just remembering what she looked like, and how terrified she looked. And then he came to the door, her boyfriend, and was just started railing on me about how controlling I was as a father, and how why would I come get my adult daughter, and how much, and was trying to convince her to tell her that, you see how controlling your dad is. He won't let you go stay any place by yourself. And he was trying to invite me into the house, or into the cabin. He said, I've been wanting to talk to you for so long. And he said, because I love your daughter, and I can't believe how you don't love your daughter, and I'm the only one that loves her, and and he was just going on. And the other part of the story that was so interesting to me was, I was so panicked, and I just thought, if something's happened to her, there was all these feelings of a father welling up inside of me about, if something's happened, what am I going to do? And I just had this feeling, this clear, distinct impression come into my mind that just said, don't look at him, don't engage him. And so I just didn't pay any attention. I just ignored him, didn't act like he was even talking to me. I just kept talking to my daughter. I kept saying, just grab your stuff, let's go. But we had two vehicles there. It was our vehicle that she drove up, and I asked her, I said, well, can you are you able to drive home? And then I quickly realized she was not in any sort of an emotional state to drive. And my goal at that point was, I thought, I want him to find his own way home. I don't really care. But she said, well, can we just leave the keys here and let him drive home and return the truck on his own? And so she and I got in our car and we began to drive home, and she just broke down in tears, crying, and that's when the story really began to unravel about all the stuff that had been happening to her. And I learned that the reason she didn't come to the door right away when I knocked the first time was because he had her in a chokehold on the floor, holding her with his black belt and jiu-jitsu capabilities. And how she got out of it, she said, I honestly don't know, Dad, how I got out of the hold he had me in, but I knew you were at the door and I wanted to get to you. And knowing that you were at the door waiting for me was what I wanted. And so, sorry, I'm a little emotional.
Of course you are.
But knowing that she was safe was all that really mattered to me at that point. And I know one of her favorite places to eat was Chick-fil-A. So we went to there to get something to eat, and we just sat in the car and talked. And the most frightening thing about the whole part of this story was the reason she had texted our daughter that night to come pick her up, and she got her phone away from him, and he had fallen asleep, and when he had fallen asleep, she'd crawled underneath the bed and texted her sister to say, can you come pick me up? And she was afraid of being discovered by him, being on her phone. And she said that he had told her his plan for the next morning was to go on a hike and to take them into the woods on a hike and to kill her and then kill himself.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's why she was so panicked and wanting to get out of there, but didn't know how she was going to get out, and needed someone to come get her. And he had the key. She couldn't get the key to the truck. She felt she was stuck in this house the whole night. And so there's no question in my mind that the overwhelming feeling I had to leave and to go when I did was because her life was in danger.
And you showed up at just the exact right time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I guess another thing that part of the story I forgot was when I was having that conversation with her before she left. I can't remember exactly how it came up, but she had mentioned to me that her friend Cameron, her boyfriend, would read her text messages, and I asked her the question. I said, "Well, who else of your friends ever takes your phone and reads your text messages?" And it never had occurred to her that that was an odd behavior at that point. I think she was at that point so emotionally. I didn't know anything about narcissism, and this abusive behavior was such a new world for my wife and I that. But when she just mentioned that he was reading and monitoring her messages, I asked her that question. I said, "Why would you allow him to do that?" She said, "Well, he just takes my phone." And I said, "Why does that doesn't seem odd to you?" Like who? And it hadn't ever occurred to her at that point. And so I think she was thinking that was kind of the first. Now that she's kind of told me this and was sharing the story, that stuck in her mind about how controlling a behavior that was, because he was always feeding her information about me, about how controlling I was as a father, and that's why she couldn't be around me, because I was trying to control her life.
So that's why she was sneaking out and not letting you know.
Sneaking out and not letting anyone know. And even another really sad part of the story was she has a soy allergy. And one of the things that she had done prior to going up to this cabin was she had made this Valentine's Day dinner. She had spent all this time making this thing, and preparing for this. And then on their way up there, on the way to the cabin, he was making fun of her cooking, the food. He didn't want to eat any of this stuff. He went and ate at a Chinese restaurant because he knew of her allergies. He knew that she couldn't eat. And she was so sad because of him not wanting to eat the meal she had prepared, how much fun he was making of what she had cooked. And so she left him at the restaurant and went someplace else to get something to eat. And it was some fast food place that was nearby. And she just started crying in this other place, and the people behind the counter felt so sorry for her. They just gave her food for free because she's telling them this story about how her boyfriend had just totally rejected her meal. And so there was all these things like that were happening that we weren't aware of. And when she related to me later the story of her when I picked her up and how much peace she felt, she said, just being in the car and us driving, she said, one of the things that we loved to do as a family and her growing up was we would watch college football on Saturday mornings together. And she said, I felt I felt like I was back at that same place again when I was a little girl, just being with you. And she said, your reaction to me was one of pure love. You didn't ever question me. You didn't get upset with me. Why was I there? You just loved me and comforted me and helped me. And she said that was such a contrast to the way was being treated and all the lies he'd been telling me that I had been believing all this time. She said that was the first time that it really was beginning to settle into her mind that this relationship she was in was not healthy. which is so crazy to think about. But she said that because of all the things that he had sort of convinced me of about you, and now actually seeing how you were reacting with me was so opposite of what he was telling me how you were and how you would be. And anyway, that was the beginning of. But that, I thought, okay, well now it's all over, and she's now realizing that this is not good. She's not going to talk to him, but it wasn't. She kept going back, and it was so hard to finally get her to do that, and part of the way that we further understood all of what was happening was she had gone to our church bishop and was sharing with him what had happened, and actually shared with him that she had been raped. And he said, "Do your parents know? And do they know anything about what's happening with you?" And she said they didn't. He said, "Well, I'll go with you to your house, and we can talk with your parents together." And so they did. And again, I just felt complete. I wasn't upset with her. And she said, "That's another one of the things, Dad, that helped me to break away from him, was because when we told you what had happened, you said you just dropped to your knees and hugged me." And said you weren't angry with me. You weren't. She said, "I just never felt so much love in that moment than I felt from you at that time." But even at that point, after all of that, it still wasn't. She still had other encounters with him. And eventually the way that I was so, at that point, really worried about any contact with him. I kept trying to keep her away from him. She had, she was learning to play the organ, or the organ at our church, and she'd go over to practice, and there was a lady that was helping her learn, and she knew about the situation at that point, and we shared with her, because we were trying to have other people help us protect her. And I got a call from her saying that she was over at the church to help, was supposed to meet with her, and she said she wasn't there. And I said, "Oh, well, I can see on the app that she's there," but what she was doing, she was leaving her phone, and then she would go with him. And I was so panicked at that moment. I thought, "Oh no, we've got to find her," but I didn't know I couldn't find her. And so we were looking all around, and eventually she came back, and back to the church. I was still there, and she said that she had gone with him to tell him that she was ending everything with him. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, why would you ever be alone with him again?" But she said, "I just felt like I had to just share all my feelings and get it all out of me." And but that was eventually that was their last encounter that but I was so distraught. The panic and the fear of not being able to, just knowing that she had again and I felt like it was just, why would she go back, knowing all that she had been through? Why and would ever have that even be around him again? But I've learned a lot about how these relationships and how hard it is to eventually break away from them, and the emotional dependence that that she felt on him, and that he had created within her, that she only felt like he was the only one that could really support her. And anyway, so that's pretty much the story.
It's that dependence is really, it's so crazy when you look back on it to see it. But when you're in it, they build you up, then they rip the rug out from underneath you, but then they come in and they're your hero. And like, oh my gosh, you're down here. Let me help you. Let me comfort you. Nobody knows you the way I do. Nobody loves you the way I do. And they just create that constant back and forth to where it's like a dependence. It's almost like a chemical, like a drug dependence on them.
Yeah, she said that one of the things that was what she realized afterwards was that because it started out so almost picture perfect. It started out so like he was the answer to all her heartbreak, all the things that she was, and she kept thinking through all the times of abuse, she kept thinking, well, if it was that way at the beginning, we can get back to that place. And it never did.
That's right.
And it only got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. And but there were all these moments of just continual, like he would build her up to break her down, build her up to break her down, and that cycle continued over and over to where she became so emotionally dependent that he was the only thing that could help her feel any sort of joy or any sort of happiness.
Yeah, and it gets to the point where they don't even have to knock you down anymore. Just the fact that they're not knocking you down ends up feeling like a comforting place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that something didn't happen today. He didn't get upset today, so that's a win.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And they're very, very tricky about at first, building you up, and then the first knockdown, you think it's your own fault. Like, what did I do to make them change the way they feel about me?
So true. She's expressed that so many times about she felt like everything was her fault, and he convinced her that it was her fault, and everything. It was never ever him. It was always something she did or something she said that was the cause of him doing or saying something that he did.
Right. Like, of course I did this. Of course I said this. Look what you did to me first.
Yeah. Or she would believe, or she would share something about something he said, and then he would act like he never said it. And so she thought she was completely crazy.
Yes, there's that too. Yeah. That never happened, or you're overreacting, you're embellishing. I was just kidding. All of those.
Yeah. When I was telling you about when she was at the fast food place and was crying, he came and found her and started telling all of them that, she overreacts. This really wasn't that big a deal. He was actually laughing at her about her and telling her that she just needed to stop being so emotional and getting upset about such little things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Well, I commend you and your family and the entire community of support you had around her, because you guys reacted and you particularly reacted exactly the way that will help somebody who's in one of those relationships. Because if you were the dad that's coming to the door saying, "What are you doing here? I don't understand," or gets into a fight, either verbally or physically with the boyfriend, you are only reinforcing all of those negative things that he had said about you that would, push her closer to him and further apart from you. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for people in that circle to just support and validate, understand, and be patient. Oh my gosh, the patience. I was one of the victims, so I wasn't the family on the outside watching, but I imagine it has to be so frustrating to see that returning and returning and returning.
Yeah, yes.
It's an understatement, right?
Yeah, and I would think, okay, we've had this conversation. She's got to get it now, and it just wasn't. And I think one of the things that helped me was I began to educate myself about the pattern of abuse and how narcissism, how people with narcissistic behaviors do things. And then I began to think, how is it possible that they all read the same? There's a textbook that they all read,
Isn't that
that they all
weird?
pick up the same behavior and they act the same way. How is it possible that they all? And then once you experience it, you can spot it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like but I didn't ever see that before. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was actually just having a conversation with a friend the other day about, maybe everyone talking about these behaviors or the documentaries that show abusive behavior, maybe these abusers are learning what to do from there. And I'm like, no, that it's in them. They know it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
weird. It is really weird. Like every story may not be exactly my story, but it's so parallel and I can find so many commonalities between every single story.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And one of the things that I'm so proud of her. I mean, and I guess one of the things I'm proud of her because of the work she's done to overcome all that she experienced. I mean, the therapy that she went through, medications, etc. She has made such tremendous progress, which is just. But that was one of the things that was so. If I think about, from my perspective, the relationship I had with her, and the I felt like there was this. I worried at times, would I ever get my daughter back? Would that relationship ever be what it was in terms of just who she was as a person? Because I felt like she was just different, and rightly I understand, but this is one of the things that was hard for me. That I felt like almost felt like a death in a way, that I felt like I've lost this daughter. I felt like I've lost this relationship that's been such a treasure to me in terms of just who she was. But now, helping her and being with her on this other side of all of it, the relationship we have now is more beautiful and strong than ever. And that's one of the things that I've treasured and treasure now, and looking back on all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to find like the silver lining of, and I don't even know that that would be the right term, but the after healing from the aftermath, just the relationships that you can develop with people that were in your life and still are in your life is incredible. And again, I commend you guys. I mean, for a victim to know that there is this lifeline that's just sitting there waiting, and it like you leave the relationship and they're welcoming you with open arms. You go back and they're still there waiting, and we're going to be here for you. We are going to support you. To know that is all the difference between having the outcome that you have now versus, a much more tragic outcome that could have happened. And I mean, amazing. Like without the fact that you guys did all this before you did the research on everything is amazing. I mean, you guys really made the difference.
Well, thank you. If I look back, my feeling is I honestly felt like I was just guided by God. I can't explain it. Like the feeling that I had to go, the feeling I had and how to interact with him, because I know that drove him completely crazy, that I would not even make eye contact with him and engage him and acknowledge. Because I thought I just have this feeling he wants to get you wrapped up into his vortex of words and argument, and I just wasn't. I kept having the feeling, don't do it.
Oh, for sure. And I think he probably would have twisted it and somehow convinced your daughter to stay. And that, look, your dad is the bad guy. I mean, he started out with it, trying to say that you were controlling. He would have
Right.
definitely played into that more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you listened to that voice or that gut or whatever you want to, the guidance.
Yes. Well, and another part for me, different from the outside non-victim perspective was it my feelings. Well, the only thing I did ever say to him was he kept asking me to look at him and he kept wanting me to talk and to look, and the only thing I did is I did look at him, and one thing I said to him was, "You don't really want to know what I think about you."
Yeah.
And I had to go through my own process of forgiveness. Those feelings my feelings at that point as a father, I wanted to protect, and a role of protecting and providing from my family, and feeling that I had failed in some way was a really difficult thing. And to feel that I would ask myself, what was my role? Why did I spot this sooner? How could have I seen this differently? What could the blaming of myself, like, why didn't I pick up on the signs? And learning to forgive myself and to forgive him, because I was angry for sure at him, but it wasn't serving me in any way. And eventually I began to realize that what I really realized was, if I'm going to do the best I can for her and help her get to where and heal, he's not worth my time spending my energy and my effort and my emotion on him. That if I want the best outcome for her, my energy needs to be focused on her.
Well, and that's exactly right. I think that I even found with myself trying to understand my abuser and why did he do those things? Was it just me, or is it something about him? And then I realized I'm never going to understand it. And all I'm going to do is burn myself out trying to get inside of his head. So I'm glad you did that. And I want to use this as kind of a segue into the next part of our conversation, because I'm sure there are a lot of factors that made you look at men specifically in mental health and burnout, but I'm sure this may have played a little bit of a role in that, as far as, like you mentioned, being the protector of the family and the provider for the family. So do you want to discuss a little bit about what got you into what you are doing, the mentoring and the coaching, and what you are doing with that?
Yeah, thank you. And I had sometimes, I often say that dots sort of connect when we look back. And until just this moment, I don't know that I didn't make that connection necessarily, that part of this experience probably is one of those things that's wanted to help me to do that. But besides that, one of the things that I felt in my life is, like I think a lot of men who've worked in a career for a while, had some level of success in what they've done, look back and start quite wondering, well, is this it? Is there a legacy that I'm leaving? What legacy am I leaving? And I had an experience, probably about like 7 years ago. My mom had passed away in 2015, and it was in 2018, and my dad's health was deteriorating, and so we realized that he couldn't live on his own. And so, if you haven't experienced it yet, at some point, most of all will experience the opportunity to go help take care of parents and prepare a house for sale or whatever we need to do to help them. And my dad had a dream when he was younger. When I was young, I was probably 10 years old. He wanted to own his own small engine repair business. And I was so excited for him. I thought, oh, my dad's going to do this thing he's always talked about. And I remember him going and he'd come on with the manuals, and he would study. And then I remember he had this engine that he would take apart and put back together, and saw him do that many times. And for whatever reason, I don't know exactly why this business didn't really take off for him. It never materialized in the way at least I know that he envisioned, and that I was excited about. So here we are in 2018, clearing out his garage, and I found these old manuals sitting there, and I found the old engine buried under all this pile of stuff. And now we're literally taking all this stuff and we're putting it into a dumpster. And I literally felt like I'm throwing my dad's dreams, and I'm throwing dad's dreams away. And I thought, am I on the same path? Am I doing the same? What am I doing with my own passion and dream? And am I living the life that I've always imagined myself living? And the answer to that question was I wasn't. And I began to think, well, what's going to change? How am I going to change this? And so that was a pivot point in my life and my thinking, and began me realizing I don't want to get to the end of my life with a level of regret that says I didn't do the thing that I was feeling like I wanted to do. And so that was the beginning for me, was a moment with that experience.
Well, I imagine that has to be difficult too, because you're not 20 coming to that realization. And then,
Yeah,
to
right?
be in your career and comfortable in your career, and realize that you want to and you need to make that pivot.
Exactly. And that was one of the limiting beliefs. And one of the things that I struggled with early was I thought, well, man, if I share this, where are people going to think of me? Are people going to think he's lost his mind, that he's going through this crisis?
Yeah,
And
I was going to say
it's just a
midlife crisis.
phase.
Yeah.
It's just a phase. And then but I thought, no. And I, as I spent time reflecting and thinking about impactful stories in my life and moments of my life, I began to realize that this feeling was in my heart, and what I've learned and continuing to learn in my life is when I have that feeling that's in my chest, and I think we all have that we want greater expansion and fuller expression in our lives, and we're meant to do something more, and yet we'll let these beliefs in our minds keep us down, and we'll let fear or being unfamiliar, let the things that we want to do. Because what I'm continuing to learn is that the thing that we want to do, it may feel unfamiliar to us, and our brains are sort of wired to protect us. And so when we're experiencing that feeling of unfamiliarity, we think, oh, well, if I go back to this safe zone, well, that means that this thing I was thinking about must not be right. And we only feel that because it's unfamiliar. And what I'm
Right.
learning as I step into doing the things that maybe stretch me. You think about a rubber band is really most useful when it's being stretched. And so as I stretch myself, my area of comfort begins to expand, and I feel what used to be unfamiliar and less comforting now feels familiar. I'm just thinking, probably when you first started your podcast, it probably felt really scary and unfamiliar. And now you go, it's not scary at all.
Right, right. I was actually just thinking that. I remember thinking, I'm going to push myself out of this comfort zone, because I felt that I was very complacent with where I was in life. I was in a good spot in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and it was fine, and I probably could have continued that track and been satisfied. But then I feel like there would always have been this piece of me wondering, well, what if I would have done that? Or what if I would have tried that instead? And so,
Right.
yeah, definitely I felt that.
Yes. And so that was, and I tried it. One of the things I've done is I began to think about that. I thought, well, okay, wasn't really clear on exactly what I was going to do. I heard and had seen people flipping houses, so I thought, can I flip a house? Never done that before. And so I went to some meetups and I learned a little bit about what people do and how you find houses. And I flipped a house. Well, I'll tell you, talking about being uncomfortable, unfamiliar. it was kind of, I felt this chicken and egg thing. I thought, well, I need to be able to have people to help me do this, but if I don't have a house that they can actually work on, then how do I get them? So I ended up with this house before I had anybody to really help me do anything with it. But
I
now it was
love
all
it.
real.
Oh my
I thought, okay, now
gosh.
the show is really on. I got to figure out how to do it. And I did it. And so, and now as I look back on it, I mean, I made some money, lost some money, and you learn. But what that experience helped me to realize is that if I just take a step and I just do something, it's like driving at night with your lights on. You keep driving to the end of the light. The path isn't always exactly clear, but if you just keep driving, you just drive to the end of the light. You keep driving, and the path becomes clear as you keep moving. And that's what I've just been discovering, is that the movement is what has helped me to get more clear on this. I couldn't really define the necessarily with great clarity what I was feeling called to do, but as I began to move, that began to take shape and became clear.
Now, did you talk to other men, other friends or family members to see if they had been feeling the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love your question, because I had a dear friend that had was talking with, and he said to me, he said, I'm always telling my kids, live your dreams. You can be anything you want to be. And he said, it smacked me right in the face when my son turned to me and said, well, Dad, are you living yours?
Wow. Yeah.
And he said, I realized I was not. And so, as I've definitely talked with other fathers, men that in careers that have felt very similar, and had the similar feelings, experience, that yeah, I'm feeling a little bit stuck. And what I've discovered is that when to me, purpose is like fuel, and vision is like the well, you have a vision, and then the purpose is the fuel that gets you there. And we all have these things we carry around. Oh, there we go.
You
In our
can't get away from
pockets,
them, right?
and they have this wonderful thing in them called a GPS. But they're really only very useful when they have an address. And that's what vision to me is. Vision is like an address and a GPS. And once I have the address and I know where I'm going, then it's much easier to get there. But if I don't put an address into it, it's you do stay stuck. So that's why I feel like having a clarity of your vision and understanding what that is and getting clear on it is putting the address, and now you know where you're going.
So what do you do with your services? You're not like a trade, let's learn a new trade and I'll teach you how to flip a house and I'll teach you how to do all these other things. What is it that you specifically offer?
Yeah, one of the things that I will help people get clear on that, on vision and understanding purpose, because that's the thing I've discovered in my own life, is when having clarity of the purpose, and then creating the vision. And the other thing is I've learned is that whatever I'm desiring to do, if it doesn't align with my values are always going to win out. And I feel like that's where a lot of people become stuck, is because the things that if there's conflict between values and desires, you're always going to feel this tension and the feeling of stuck, and the values will win. But when you have values and desires and your strengths in alignment, now you're really moving with clarity and with flow, and life. Not that there's not challenges, but those things become much easier and those obstacles are easier to overcome when those things are all in alignment. Because when they're not, that's when you experience this dissonance between where you're trying to move to and your values. So becoming clear on those things is really, really helpful.
Oh, I love it because, in high school you have guidance counselors, in college you have, different counselors that help guide you. Like, what career path do you want to go down? What do you want where do you see yourself in the future? And then when you get into that career and you're like, okay, this is what I've wanted, but then you have like this next part of your life experiences that might be influencing you to think that's actually not what I wanted to do. It's, you know, having that extra guidance, one, for somebody to say it's okay to not feel totally satisfied with where you are right now. And
Mhm.
I love that. I love that you're offering those services to help somebody guide people to what they actually really want.
Right. Yeah. And that realization that my life and my experiences, yeah, I always felt like for a lot of my life that, oh, well, I had this limiting belief that I wasn't enough, that I didn't have enough experience, enough education. And now looking back at life, I realized how limiting and that's, I think, is allowing those limiting beliefs are what hold a lot of us back, and the feeling of fear, and we often will look at failure as this negative, and failure really is just your it's a first attempt at learning.
Right. You can't learn if you don't fail.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about how many inventions were made, or if I were and thinking about perfection. I mean, I just held up my phone, but this phone that I have is not the first version that was ever made. The cars we drive are not the first version of cars, but it's always evolving and improving. And so sometimes just feeling like, well, if I don't do it perfectly, if I make an attempt and it doesn't turn out exactly perfectly, well, then I've failed somehow and it's not good, and therefore I should stop. And it's if we look at those things, that if we look at life and experience and things that don't turn out exactly like we want as a failure, and we stop that, and then that's when it becomes. But if we're continuing to move forward and continuing to learn, it's never a failure. It's just a learning. You can turn that into learning.
Yeah. I asked my kids the other day what their definition of failure was. And I have three kids, and the consensus was failure is when you stop after messing up the first time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to write that one down.
That is profound. Yeah, that is really
Yeah, and they're
wonderful.
young. I have no idea. Maybe it's because, when you're a kid, you don't have all those experiences that have taught you that you can't do something, or that you're not good enough, or you are going to fail. You still have this like wide open mind of, I can do anything. So maybe that's why they're
Yes.
able to come up with something a lot more profound than I could have come up with myself.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes life, but the way I just describe it, sometimes we start off with this dream, and then life sort of happens, experiences, and the dream sort of gets knocked out of us a bit, and we at some point we stop. And one of the things, and now looking back now with some life experience, I mean, we raised 5 kids, but one of the things I love is, as a grandfather, is watching our grandkids and seeing life a bit through a different, with experience in different lens, and realizing what we're talking about, like how when they stand up to walk, or when they want to start learning to climb up a ladder or a slide, the stairs to a slide, it's never perfect. There's bumps, there's bruises, there's times when they miss a step or they fall, but then they're right back up doing it all over again.
Yeah,
And there's so much that we as adults will sometimes, we could learn a great lesson from
right.
from watching them, how they learn about their life, and we all experience it, and I guess the other thing is, I mean, that's a huge leap to go from crawling to walking to running, and we've all experienced it. And I think sometimes just taking a moment to realize we've all taken big quantum leaps in life, and you can keep doing that.
Yeah.
It
I
doesn't
mean,
have to stop when we're an adult.
right. If only we can look at ourselves like our child selves would have looked at us, like, go do it. You can totally do that. Or believe in ourselves like the people around us believe in us.
Yes, so true. And there's there's and that reality exists, and so often we convince ourselves that there's only one reality, and there's a totally opposite. And just, I mean, what we were talking about earlier with our daughter, I mean, she could have totally become convinced that was now reality of life, and there was a completely different world for her that's she's realized, and she's married and has a child and doing amazing things.
I love that. Do you think, Dean, that we've missed any topics that we wanted to cover?
No, this has been
Okay.
amazing for me. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful that you invited me here to be on the show and be able to share some of my experience and to share this experience. So thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you. This has been a really great conversation. Before we go, do you have any links or anything you'd like to share if people want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, my website is deantaylorofficial.com. You can also find me at Instagram at Dean Taylor Official. On my website, I have a couple of free resources that people could download. I've shared some of my own life lessons and things that I've experienced, and also included in there, if they want to take a little deeper dive on if that triggers or helps them feel an own life experience, to go deeper on it. There's some journal prompts to do that. I've also have a free guide about discovering purpose and vision, and in 3 simple steps how you could make that happen today.
Well, we have covered a lot of topics in this conversation, but do you have any final words of encouragement or wisdom that you would like to leave listeners with?
Yes, I say that it's never too late to start dreaming again, but always too early to stop.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that. Well, Dean, thank you again so much. This was really an enjoyable conversation. I loved everything we talked about.
Well, thank you. I have too. I've enjoyed being a guest here and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you again, Dean, for joining me today, and thank you, Warriors, for listening. I've included the links Dean was referring to, as well as his 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone.
Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.